Hi, welcome to Baden Hill. Let's build some more bridges. This is part 3 of our bridges unit, and we're going to continue learning about Europe and its diversity. And in this segment, we're kind of literally going to build some bridges by joining together the names of 5 countries. And we're going to call this Franger Benelux. And each part of that expression is going to stand for one of the nations that we will study. Now, part of this is accepted. Benelux stands for Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. The first part, maybe you can guess, it stands for France and Germany, and that's my invention, so I get blamed for it. But hopefully this will just kind of help you remember that these 5 countries go together. They form what can be called the northwest or north central portion of Europe. And each country has a rich history, rich geography. We're going to be blazing through them. Unfortunately, it doesn't feel like we're doing them justice, but we're going to do our best. So let's start with the entry point to Europe. Okay, so if you are traveling from the British Isles to the continent, to the mainland, you will generally cross, okay, if you're thinking traditionally, I mean, now we can go anywhere we want by airplane, but if you were to cross by boat, you'd most likely leave from Dover, and that is in England, and the White Cliffs of Dover are very famous, probably because so many people saw them coming and going between the 2 countries of England and France, and it was an awe-inspiring sight. It was also very difficult to scale those cliffs, and so it was maybe daunting for the French, and they realized that maybe they better not try too often to invade England, although they did try, and they did succeed. And that's why the English language has so many French and Latin roots in it. In 1066, William the Conqueror came over from a portion of France called Normandy and conquered England. So anyway, you'd cross from Dover in England and you'd land maybe at Calais. Calais is a northwest French seaport. And so that would be your entry point. We're going to jump now and talk about the contours of France, and then we'll finish by just generally talking about what France is known for. So if you're looking at France, you would definitely want to know about the Alps and Mont Blanc, which is the highest mountain in Europe west of the Caucasus Mountains. And Mont Blanc is it's actually 15,777 feet high. Yes, I actually memorized that. And so that makes it higher than any of the Colorado peaks. It's not nearly as high as the Himalayas, and Mount Everest is 29,000 feet, so twice as high, but still. Mont Blanc is on the border between Italy and France, and so part is in Italy and part is in France. And the Alps are known, the French Alps are obviously one side of the Alps that are in Switzerland, and the Alps are known for just their picturesque beauty and the dramatic nature of those mountains. The Matterhorn is maybe the most famous, and you can pretend to be in the Matterhorn at Disneyland. So those are the Alps, and that's a major geographical feature, also forming one of the boundaries of France. And you should know that France is named for the Franks. The Franks were a group of Germanic peoples that basically conquered both France and Germany in the 700s AD. And the most famous Frank ruler was Charlemagne, also known as Karl der Große, and he was Charles the Great. And his grandfather was Charles Martel, who basically saved Europe when it was being invaded by other peoples. And so his family became the rulers of the Franks, and France was then named for the Franks. And Frankfurt in Germany is a fort that was created by the Franks, probably on top of Roman ruins. That's how it is all over Europe. So the capital of France is Paris. I'm sure most of you knew that. And the river that flows through Paris is the Seine River, S-E-I-N-E, Seine. And there's another river that you should know called the Rhone River, and that makes the southeast boundary of the country and flows into the Mediterranean Sea and also into the, Lake Geneva. And so that's obviously Switzerland, and it forms the southeast boundary of the country. The Bay of Biscay is basically that gouge out of the coast that is France, and then also the Iberian Peninsula, Spain. And so that is a major feature. Remember that Europe is the peninsula of peninsulas. And so the Bay of Biscay is that big gouge on the western part. And the Strait of Dover, again, is, you've got the Strait of Dover, which is the English Channel, and I should say the Strait of Dover and the English Channel both separate France from England, and probably both countries are happy that that's the case, at least traditionally. Now they're both together in the European Union, at least for the time being. France also owns the island of Corsica. They basically have that as part of the country today. It's a fairly independent part of the country, and its history is one that it's very interesting, because many of the Italian city-states during the Renaissance and even earlier in the Middle Ages were controlling the island of Corsica. And so there's kind of a mixed Italian-French heritage there. And the most famous Corsican is Napoleon. He was born there, and they celebrate his birth. And he was, again, in many people's eyes, he was the greatest Frenchman. And Corsica, was a place of a little bit of unrest after World War II. It had been taken over by basically by the Nazis, and that's when they took over France. And so after World War II, they probably didn't want to just give up their new identity. Even though they were associated with the Nazis, they'd come to feel more independent. And the French actually had to send troops to the island to kind of put down some unrest in 1958. The major cities of France, let's just talk about three. Of course, Paris is the capital and is the largest city in the country. The second largest is Marseille. I should say Paris is a very central city, and if you look at a map of France, it's like Paris was chosen intentionally because it can control the entire country, being at the center of the country. It's a great administrative center, although it's not on the seacoast, and that's an interesting thing to note. I remember the train ride from Germany to France. It seemed like it took forever to get to Paris in the middle of the country, but Europe really isn't that large, so it wasn't that long. So Paris is number one, Marseille is number two, and it's about 800,000 residents. And there's a bigger metropolitan area that goes to, close to 2 million. And then the third largest, I should say Marseille is on the Mediterranean coast in the area called Provence. Provence is a very traditional historical district, and it is a place of culture. And again, it's on the Mediterranean Sea, so the climate is very nice and mild there. And then you have Lyon. Lyon is not as central as Paris, but is in the west of France. And Lyon is the third largest city, and it's about the size of San Francisco, 500,000-600,000 people. So those are the three major cities. Lyon is known for its computer software industry and video game industry. It's known for its innovation. And Marseille is of course, a very busy port city, kind of the gateway for commerce because of its location on the Mediterranean Sea. And Paris, it's the city of culture and banking and everything that happens in Paris, in France. So that's France. Now let's talk about Jur, the Jur of Franjur, Germany, also known as Deutschland. Now this is an area that's close to my heart in some ways because that's where my ancestors came from. Now it wasn't called Germany when they left, but it was on the threshold. It was just starting to gain an identity as a nation, but there had been a lot of unrest as that came to happen. And there was a lot of religious unrest in the country that led my ancestors to leave because the government was kind of forcing people to all believe in one church. And my Lutheran ancestors believed that they should have freedom. And so they came to the United States in about 1870. And so Germany is close to my heart. I spent 6 months there learning about my heritage, and it was a special time. It was also the same time that the Berlin Wall was coming down. And so I need to talk about Berlin and the old capital of Germany, Bonn. After World War II and the defeat of Germany and the Nazis during World War II, Germany was divided. It wasn't supposed to be divided long term, but it ended up that way. And so there was an East Germany and a West Germany. Since then, the Berlin Wall and the division between East Germany and West Germany has fallen down. And bridges have been built, and the country has been reunited, reunified. And that has changed things even in the last 30 years. So 1990 was the year that I was in Germany, and 1989 is when things started to change and the beginning of reunification happened. East Germany had been communist. It had been largely an ally of the Soviet Union, and then the Soviet Union was weakening and eventually ceased to be a country. And so East Germany eventually merged with West Germany, and they are one country now. But at the time that I visited Germany in 1990, the capital was Bonn, and it was in the western part of Germany, and it became the financial center of the country. It didn't have lots of historical buildings. It basically became a bigger city because it had to be the capital. Berlin had always been the capital of Germany, but Berlin was divided too. And Berlin was inside of East Germany. Now, that's a very strange thing for people to understand, that this capital that was partly democratic and partly Western was actually in the eastern part of the country. And so that's a long story for another day. But the main thing is that Berlin couldn't be the capital during that time of a divided Germany. And at the same time, it was a cultural capital. And eventually, after reunification, the capital became Berlin again. And Berlin is in the northeast of the country, in the area that was known as Prussia before Germany became a country. Prussia, again, that's not Russia's little brother, but they did work together sometimes and fight each other other times back in the 1800s. So in the 1700s. Another city to know in Germany is Hamburg. Hamburg is in the north and is part of the Hanseatic League. The Hanseatic League was the northern cities of Germany and also Poland. And they formed an alliance during the Middle Ages as port cities, as commercial cities. So there's still that heritage in the northern part of Germany on the North Sea. And so Hamburg is, where we get hamburgers, right? Okay. ERS means something that comes from that city, usually a person. And so just like, we have Hamburgers, we have Frankfurters, there are also Luxembourgers. So Luxembourg, we'll talk about later, and those are people who come from Luxembourg. Notice the B-U-R-G, that means castle or a walled city. And that word is actually very important. You maybe have heard of that, Pittsburgh. Maybe you've heard people just talk about a small burg in the United States. And so burg means town or city. And it goes back to the Middle Ages when the cities, towns had walls around them. And so that's why you have so many burgs in Germany. Another city in the southeast of the country, that area is called Bavaria, and the main city there is Munich. In German, it's called München, and it's hard to say. But Munich was the site of the 1972 Olympics. It was also a site of tragedy. There was a terrorist attack on Israeli athletes by terrorists who wanted to claim Palestine as a land free of Israel, and they used violence. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Let's talk about the Ruhr Valley, which is in the northwest of the country. In the northwest, it's called the Ruhrgebiet. That means the Ruhr area, and it's an area that's kind of the most populated area in Germany. It has a string of towns that have grown together as a huge metropolitan area, and they were founded there because of the coal deposits. It was an industrial area that developed over time, and so mining for coal has always been a big part of the economy there. And they're two of the biggest industrial cities, about 600,000, 500,000, are Essen. Essen is in the eastern portion, and the other city is called Dortmund, and Dortmund is it's a part of an area called Westphalia. Westphalia is known for being a place where there was a treaty signed to end the 30 Years' War in the 1600s, which was a terrible war, and Germany was the battleground between Catholics and Protestants. So the Treaty of Westphalia is probably what Westphalia is most known for. There's also a VW camper that's called a Westphalia. Okay, so the population of Germany is about 82 million. And there has been significant immigration over the last 70 years since World War II. Now, this is interesting because obviously the Nazis wanted to get rid of anyone who was different. And that is why the Holocaust happened. And that included anybody who was different, gypsies and Eastern Europeans and certainly Jewish people. And those people were pushed out or they were put into camps and murdered. And we know that that is something we can't forget. But Germany, since World War II, has amazingly sought to be a land that welcomes refugees, that welcomes people who need asylum. And so, 12%, actually 14% of the population are immigrants. And many of those came after World War II when the country of Germany had been devastated by bombing and war, and the country needed to be rebuilt. And so they opened the door for workers from the east, from Greece, and also from Turkey. And so there were many, many guest workers. They're called Gastarbeiter. Gastarbeiter are guest workers. And so the population has been influenced by immigration. And recently, because of the civil war in Syria and other unrest in the Middle East, there has been a massive immigration of people from the Middle East, and this has created stress on the German society and economy. But again, the fact that they open their doors to these immigrants is quite a statement that they want to be the place that welcomes, and something to note. Now we can discuss the last three countries a little bit more quickly because they are smaller and maybe they haven't had the same role in global world history. But we call them Benelux, and the first one is Belgium. Well, Benelux together are known as the Low Countries not because they're low on a map, the typical maps. They're not low that way. They're actually up high. And one of them we'll see is called the Netherlands, which means that you have it's up top. And so the Netherlands we'll get to in a second, but Belgium is one of the low countries, and the reason they're called the Low Countries is because of their low altitude, their elevation. And they are below sea level largely. And so Belgium is one of the low countries, and the capital is Brussels. And it is basically the headquarters of the European Union. I should say Brussels is the capital along with two other cities, and we'll come to those in a little bit. But Brussels is usually seen as the headquarters for the EU. Belgium has a special place in recent world history because of World War I. It was basically the battleground of World War I, and the area called Flanders is referred to in a poem called In Flanders Fields. And Flanders Fields is basically the area that was fought over by the French and the Germans and the British coming in too. The British came, and the battles that were fought there killed hundreds of thousands of people, sometimes tens of thousands of people in one day. And another famous battle that was fought in what is now Belgium. Remember, Belgium has borders that were drawn after World War I, and so it's not it doesn't really divide like we would expect. It's very artificial. But within Belgium, you have Waterloo, and Waterloo is where Napoleon lost. Eventually, he was defeated in 1815 by the British and the others who were fighting with the British. The Duke of Wellington is famous for defeating Napoleon. The Duke of Wellington defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. Belgium is also known for its chocolate. Yes, Belgian chocolate is world famous for its wonderful richness and taste, although you can find pretty good chocolate all over Europe, in Switzerland and Germany and France and elsewhere. I hope that helps you understand Belgium just a little bit more and think of it in terms of its relationship to the other countries of Benelux and to Germany and France as well. Now let's talk about the Netherlands. The Netherlands, it has, again, the borders have shifted over the centuries. They're very artificially drawn today. They were controlled by the Netherlands was controlled by other countries over its history, even by Spain at one point. And so just know that it's also called Holland. And so we think of those wooden shoes and other things, which I'll come to in a second. The capital of the cultural capital and economic capital of the Netherlands is Amsterdam. And amazing culture in Amsterdam. You have the Van Gogh Museum and many Flemish painters that you can go see the artwork for. So that's the commercial capital, but the real capital is The Hague. I'm sorry. The political capital is Amsterdam, but the seat of government is in The Hague. And The Hague is actually also known too for its world court for war crimes and things like that. The United Nations has designated The Hague as the place where people go on trial if they committed terrible crimes against another country, for example. So it's kind of, the world's court, literally. Rotterdam is the busiest port city of the Netherlands. And, again, historically, it was a huge cultural center. The Netherlands is the most densely populated nation in Europe. And interestingly, it's the least religious country in Europe. And so it's sad because it has a deep Lutheran background, Protestant background, but over time, because of commerce probably and the focus on making money and investing capital, the Netherlands basically lost interest in religion. And, that's something that should really make us stop and think, why does that happen? Why do people stop believing and having faith? The Netherlands, Holland, is known for so many things in our American culture. Even in San Francisco, we have a windmill. And so just know that because of its low elevation, low altitude, being below sea level, there are many dikes and dams, and these keep the water from flooding the country. And so those are very necessary. And you maybe know the story of the little Dutch boy, and there was a crack in the dam, a hole in the dam, and he put his finger in and saved the town. I mean, it's one of those silly mythical stories, but it should help you understand the fact that the Netherlands is below sea level and is prone to flooding. You also have tulips. Tulips. That's what people picture. In fact, there was a period where tulips were being used as money. And there was a tulip market. And so, you could say that the Netherlands has been very connected to economics and capitalism over the years. So that's the Netherlands, and people there speak Dutch. And last but not least, well, maybe it kind of is least of the countries that we're going to cover. Only Monaco and Liechtenstein are smaller. And there are a couple others that are really tiny states in Europe. But Luxembourg is a landlocked nation, and it is smaller than the state of Rhode Island in the United States, which is the smallest state. It is the last Grand Duchy of the world. So you have a Grand Duke who rules the country. It's a constitutional monarchy and a representative democracy, so it's very democratic. And the capital is Luxembourg City. So that is one of the three capitals of the EU. So it's Luxembourg City and Brussels and Strasbourg, which is in the east coast, the eastern part of France, between France and Germany. And those are three capitals, most likely because they are very central and can meet the needs of people throughout Europe. Luxembourg, again, is very small, but it has importance just as a state. It came out of the Congress of Vienna in 1815 and was a state that could have its own identity, even though it was so tiny. And it maybe represents the bridges that are built throughout Europe, because the people there necessarily speak multiple languages. They have three official languages, and that means German and German and French and Luxembourgish. Luxembourgish, the people there are called Luxembourgers, and so Luxembourgish is the language that they would naturally speak. And the fact that they speak those three languages, again, reminds us of the need to learn other people's languages. And so we'll end on that note, and we rejoice that Franger Benelux is building bridges.